Hi, welcome back to the latest episode of Safe Harbor, latest video episode of Safe Harbor. Today, we're going to talk about three emotions. Last time I spoke about how important it was to feel your emotions. And today, I want to talk about three emotions that I feel most of us have difficulty processing, releasing, understanding, dealing with, whatever verb you want to use. And these three are sadness, anger, and I'm going to club fear and anxiety together. So, what is the message that sadness gives you? Sadness tells you that there is an event that has occurred which is which has caused a loss of some kind. It is a message to your brain that you need to slow down because um, something that otherwise brought you happiness is no longer there. So we need to take a breath, slow down, and sometimes the feeling is to cry, or however, most people, the instinctive response to sadness is to cry. And over time, we've built a resistance to crying because we're told crying is a show of being weak or vulnerable, and it's a bad idea to be vulnerable. And here's the thing, at no point of time do you need to share your emotions with other people. That's your choice. That's your call. It's not a requirement. What is a requirement is for you to process and release the emotion. So focus on releasing the sadness. If you need to cry to release the sadness, you don't necessarily have to cry in front of your friends or family or colleagues or anybody. You can do it alone in your bathroom or your bedroom with the door shut. Nobody has to know that you're crying, but you need to release the sadness. Sadness is one of the most crucial emotions because it really hones into helping us understand what are the things that are important to us. So it's very crucial for us, for self-awareness, for us to understand what triggers sadness in us, because that is a clear indication of what is important to us. Things that we lose, which don't create sadness, um, are things that are not of priority. And sometimes we don't know this. Sometimes we've been telling ourselves something different. But the reality comes out when the emotion is triggered. Um, so yeah, so it doesn't matter if what you need to do is just lie in bed for a day, don't like not showered for 24 hours or just binge on a lot of sugar and sweet. When it's limited, when it is regulated, it's perfectly fine. So as long as it, don't use your emotions as an excuse for bad behavior. There's a difference between what I'm suggesting and using your emotions as an excuse for bad behavior. So I'm sad, so I can't pick up my kid from school, or I'm sad, so I can't show up for work, or I'm sad, so I can't help out my sick parents. Those are excuses. But I have to look after my parents, so I can't be sad. Now that's an excuse to repress the emotion. So there has to be a balance, which is what I'm saying. So you don't have to everybody who has a sense of responsibility, who listens to this and says, but what about the 10,000 things I have to do? Don't give up on them. But just like you make you have a priority list in your head, and you, based on the priority list, you take out time for different things. You have to set aside time for this. This has to go on to that to-do list. Anger. Anger is a very powerful emotion, extremely powerful. And sadness is an emotion that causes a drop in energy. Anger is an emotion that causes a hike in energy, just like happiness does, but anger is more aggressive energy. It is triggered when we feel that something wrong has happened. There's an injustice that we have witnessed or that has happened to us. So the instinct is to fight it. The instinct is to stop it from happening or rebel against it. Now, if I hate my boss and I think he or she is unreasonable, me screaming at that person is not productive. Because okay, when I come to that later, the side note, which I will talk about later and probably do an entire episode on, is that when you want to elicit a different reaction from a person, or you want somebody to understand what they've done wrong, you can't communicate emotion. You have to communicate the message. So when I yell at someone, I'm communicating that I'm angry, not necessarily why I'm angry. So the other person goes away knowing I'm angry, but they come up with their own understanding and assumptions as to why I'm angry. But even apart from that, there's something that is appropriate and something that isn't. So for example, if somebody has grazed my car and I'm really, really upset about it, it isn't appropriate or productive for me to get out of the car and start banging theirs, or yelling and screaming or hitting or whatever. That's not productive. That doesn't get me any of the results I would want from the situation. Because the only thing I'm going to communicate then is anger. So now that's a different thing. How to then that's the next step. But like so I said, I will come back to that. But as far as processing anger is concerned, now again, identify what has triggered your anger. Process that consciously, that okay, you know what, this is what gets me really, really angry, and this is the reason why I feel this is wrong. And then that's your thought. Now you have this energy that has been generated, and like I'm saying, don't beat up people. So now what to do with it? The best thing, the most ideal thing to do with anger is to exercise. Use a punching bag. Imagine the person's face on it and just go to town. Or run. So when you're running or walking or swimming, whatever it is, imagine that you're using that angry energy, and you will find yourself pushing your limits. So you'll burn a lot more calories, and you will produce endorphins, which are basically happy hormones in the body. So exercise is the ideal way to release anger, because you're releasing all this energy and putting it out in a way that is generating all this positive energy to replace it. So that's fabulous. But if you want to come up with a different way, if you want to do something more meditative, or you want to paint or whatever, you can do anything, organize. It doesn't matter, as long as it isn't hurting anyone else and you are releasing the energy, because this is energy, right? So you have to release it. When it's sadness, it's pulling down your energy, so you need to reduce the energy that you're using. But anger is creating extra energy inside of you, so now you have to take it out, otherwise you repress it, and when you repress it, the energy starts eating you up from the inside. Exactly why stomach ulcers are a very common symptom of anger issues, which you can't see. Another one is people like have marks in their hands because they're constantly clenching their fists, and these are not healthy ways of releasing your anger. Going for a drink or a smoke is also not a healthy way of releasing this anger, because what you're doing with alcohol is that you're subduing the energy with a chemical substance. You're still not processing the emotion. You found a chemical to subdue it. Not going to help you. So that was about sadness and anger. But now we're going to talk about fear and anxiety. Now, anxiety has become it's become like a bad word. It's like, and it's like so many people come to me with problems with anxiety. And I always tell them, don't question the anxiety. Don't hate yourself for being anxious, because anxiety is an emotion that is released, that is triggered by your brain realizing that you're going down a very risky or a dangerous path. So there's a lot of fear that accompanies anxiety. So it could be fear of the unknown, it could be fear of knowing that what you're doing is difficult or complicated or dangerous. So it could be either, it could be actually dangerous or it could just be complicated. You have to watch your step. It's like the crossbones outside something. So you don't go down this road skipping your way through. You have to proceed with caution. That's the message. That's the message of anxiety. Proceed with caution. And what we end up doing is we question our anxiety. Now, when we're questioning our anxiety, we're telling our brain, our intelligent thinking brain, that you're wrong for trying to proceed with caution down this path. That causes more fear and more anxiety. So we start then becoming anxious about our anxiety, which is the problem, which becomes overwhelming, which becomes something that just incapacitates a person, and you just, shut down, or you have these phobias that you just can't deal with that situation because it's just too overwhelming for you to even think about it now. Or you go through it on autopilot, so now you're not proceeding with caution at all, and you're ignoring what your brain told you to do, which is always a bad idea. Always a bad idea to not listen to your gut, to not listen to your instinct. You have to listen to your instinct, but what you do with it is what's important. So when you're feeling anxious, step back, accept that the situation warrants anxiety. Now, if your logical thinking brain says, but this is not something that should be causing anxiety, then that has to take, if you take another step back and try to understand, okay, why am I anxious about this then? Because if my brain thinks, if my conscious thought is, this is easy, then what is it about this situation that is making me proceed with caution? And then be cautious about that. For example, let's just take the current situation of the quarantine, the COVID-19 situation that's happening across the world. Everybody should be anxious because it's the anxiety which is going to make sure that you wash your hands every time you've touched something that could have been in contact with the virus. It's your anxiety which is going to remind you to wear a mask when you go out. When does this become a problem? This becomes a problem when I become so anxious and so overwhelmed with the anxiety that I'm not able to step out of my house to visit the doctor, or step out of my house to get groceries. So now and there's no delivery service, and now I'm starving myself because I don't have it in me to step out of my house. So that's the problem. The problem is not anxiety. The problem is how I'm dealing with it. So the most the easiest way, the quickest trick with anxiety is to go down the worst possible situation, the catastrophe that you think is going to happen, and plan it out. Okay, if this happens, and then this will happen, and this will happen, and then that major disaster is going to happen. Okay, let me just accept that it's going to happen for a second, and what am I going to do then? Now, if I've got my worst possible scenario covered with a plan, anything else just seems a little bit easier. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who has an anxiety disorder, because this is going to sound super easy in theory and be astronomically more difficult in practice. And for that, you do need one-on-one therapy. But it's not impossible. It takes everybody. It's hard for everyone to deal with anxiety, and for someone who has a pre-existing issue with anxiety, it's just going to be astronomically more difficult, but it's still not impossible. There are ways to deal with it, but repressing it or questioning it, or just trying to say, no, I'm being stupid because this is not worth my anxiety, is a disservice you're doing to yourself, because there you're reducing your self-worth. When you're reducing your self-worth, you're you're really just chipping away at yourself, and that's not helping you even 1%. So um to 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 wind up for today, to come back to the point that I did want to really hone in on, was understand what action your emotion is telling you, is triggering you to do, and choose an appropriate version of that action. But don't do nothing. Don't just sit with it. Don't just try and push it down. Always feel, process, release. The only way to get rid of an emotion is to release it. And the best thing about all negative emotions is that once you release them, they just go away. Positive emotions regenerate. If I'm happy and I release my happiness, I'm just going to get more happy. So that's the best part about it. And emotions are basically a very integral part of the way our brains are designed to function, to keep us alive, to tell us what to do when we don't have enough time to actually process it in our heads for 30 seconds. It tells us what to do in 10 seconds. We're going to do a whole podcast on that as well soon. That's one of my favorite topics about emotions and the way our brain works, how fast our brain can react to stimuli and why. So to wind up for today, feel your emotions, process them, understand where they're coming from, release them. If you feel that what you're feeling is not logical, then take a little bit more time to understand it better. Because maybe you're missing out on something, or maybe your brain hasn't processed something in totality. So you need to then check back with it and say, hey, why am I feeling like this for this situation, for this trigger? So either your brain gets rewired, or you then get to know yourself a little bit better, so you can now create your comfort zone accordingly, know what's going to happen when it happens, so that you're more in control of yourself. So that's all for today, and I hope you have a great week.